The Disrupt Education vlog can be found on YouTube. To hear it in podcast form, search Disrupt Education on any of the following podcast platforms: Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or Stitcher. Welcome to this episode of Disrupt Education. We are in Oak Park, Illinois. Jahmari Moore, thanks for being here, man.
No problem. Thank you.
Coming back from University of Wyoming.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're about, man.
Okay, so basically, who I am about. I'm a people's person. I love people, communication. I love communicating with people, educating people. I grew up in this west side of Chicago. Then I moved to Oak Park. Through high school, and then after that I was fortunate enough to have an offer from the University of Wyoming for football, and so I was able to do that, and I'm still in school right now, and so that's basically what I'm doing right now. I'm an education major. Political science is my focus, and I am in hopes to become an educator someday. I'm still trying to figure out other subjects that I want to teach other than just political science, because I'm not really a huge political science guy, but I want to educate myself in that realm. So I'm learning a lot right now, so it's pretty cool.
What does your exit look like? You want to be a teacher in high school, like a history teacher, or where does that fit?
So I am secondary, so I'm thinking more so of high school. I just think that transition would be, like, transition from high school to college is like really important. I realized that going through it myself. And so as far as what subject, I'm actually like really into writing, creative writing. So maybe English, maybe like more so towards English or history or so, like maybe history, but more so like writing. I'm really into like creative writing and poetry.
So you mentioned that transition from high school to college, and being an athlete, I think there's a lot of supports there and different things like that. Tell us about that life through high school into where you are now. What was that path like? What were some struggles? What were some cool things that you saw?
Well, actually, I feel like it started even before high school with me, because I went to Francis Scott Key Elementary. It goes from first grade until 8th grade. And so it was a very small school. Like, my graduating class was like 33 kids. And I just think it wasn't really on the same level financially. Like, it was like usually a lot of funding would come from like the neighborhood, how that's set up, and it just wasn't really a high income place. And so I didn't really have a lot of resources going in. Like, I mean, we barely have textbooks, places to sit, stuff like that, but it was all I knew. Like, that was all I knew growing up. And then I make the transition to go to Oak Park River Forest, and I'm way behind. Like, my first day of school, I was behind. There was a summer read, I remember, everyone had read the book, and I had no clue what was even going on, and I had to like find a way to catch up and read and participate. And just like from that start, I knew like it was going to be really hard for me, but I met some really good like people and teachers. Like, I learned from the people around me, and so I think it was really important, the friends I made along the way, and being able to adapt and hang around people that was different from me and pick up on a lot of different things. That helped me a lot in high school. And then I also made some really good relationships with teachers that, you know, would take some extra time with me and like explain things to me in a better way.
Right.
And so I think that helped me a lot as well. So then going into, so I start off from a place that was predominantly black. And then I go into Oak Park River Forest, where it's pretty diverse. And now I'll go to the University of Wyoming, which was predominantly white. So now I feel like I've had all of these different experiences, and now I could kind of measure myself in those situations and kind of compare all of my different experiences and like mold my like opinion about certain things. And I basically have seen everything now. So that's where I'm at right now. Like, I'm at a predominantly white school, but it's not. I don't think it's as hard for me. It was definitely a huge culture shock coming from Oak Park to somewhere like Wyoming, especially because where we are is a very liberal area. And then you go into somewhere that's like completely conservative. It's just a completely different environment. And so there's a huge culture shock there, but it's not, the transition is not as bad as what it used to be, because I understand, like, because I went here and got to know people outside of my race, and like the people, like people from my background, I think it was easier to understand like other people when I went away.
I think that's so powerful to understand it. When did you actually realize that as an individual going through those different cultures and kind of seeing, I mean, there are kind of microcultures.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Wyoming's a macro culture, but like, when did you see that? When did that, because you're young, man, I wouldn't have never have noticed that.
I think one of the biggest things I realized was my freshman year of college, going into a very conservative place around the time of the election.
Yeah.
The election is important. Now, out here in the liberal area, I personally feel like how it is here is that you kind of have to share an opinion. Like, you have, collectively, if you want to live in this place, you have to have a similar opinion as people, because if you have a different opinion, then people will crucify you. Like, people will like tear you apart.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's why I feel like people do have different opinions here, but people don't feel safe enough to really express themselves how they want to. And so that's where the tension is created.
Right.
So now I go to a different place out of here, and I could go back to the election. Me watching the election, and I personally, like, you know, I didn't want Donald Trump to win, like, just because, like, I felt like he didn't care about my people and like who I was personally. There's good things that comes out of him being president, but just like morally, I wasn't really comfortable with it. Especially because he represents us. But out there, it was like more acceptable and like almost a normal thing. Like, I had teammates that I was really good friends with, like close with, like no problems. And then the election comes, and then they have a "Make America Great Again" hat. So it puts me in a lot of conflict because it's someone I really like. I have the most respect for them, and then this happens, and now they're associated with something that like I'm not a part of. Like, I'm not me. And so, I felt like I would have been hypocritical if I was just like, oh, I can't rock with him or be a certain way towards him, because I felt like that's the same thing that Donald Trump represents. And so I didn't want to be hypocritical, so it really was hard for me to just like take that in, and I had to really step back and like say, like, I have to just talk to this person and ask them why. Like, why do they think? And like, most of the time when I talk to them, a lot of stuff they say makes sense. And it's like, you don't really look at them like as crazy as you would somewhere here. Because if that happened here, it would be like everyone would be after this person. Like, it'd be a huge topic around town. Out there, it's like normal. And so I have to like talk to people and understand them. And then I felt like I don't have to use that just to hate them.
You're right.
So,
you learn from it. Like, it's kind of an interesting. Do you think there, you know, how do you think you would change something, maybe that part of high school where the conversations become open, people feel safer talking about, you know, their belief systems and or like, how would you change high school? How would you change it? How, like, if you could go back into high school, what kind of things would you change in a system that you went through?
So I feel like the system is more so, it's all about the system and not the student. Like, I feel like that there's a specific way that you have to do things, but everybody learns differently, everyone operates differently, and so it only is the most successful for the people who's used to that specific way. Like, in school, I read this article. It talked about, I don't remember the title, but it talked about bedtime stories. It talked about how, like, when people are younger, parents usually read them bedtime stories. It seems like not a big deal, but this article talked about how it stressed the importance of literacy and like reading early on in that age, and like how that was a value. So parents kind of who were successful in the education field would plant that seed early on the child. But every child doesn't come from that background. Like, every child doesn't come from reading every night. It's some kids that grow up having to babysit or clean and cook and stuff like that. So there's real life values. They're not really learning about everything you need to do like in the school system. They're learning about what you do in life. And so now you get to high school, it's people that's already they're used to it. Like, it's some people that I've met people who think school is like, oh, like whatever, but they're really good at it because it's like that's what they've been trained to do. But there's people that have been trained for just life in general and survival. But then when you get into the school setting, because that's something like acceptably like that people should do,
Yeah.
they get there and they feel like less because that's something that they weren't really as prepared for. They feel like that's something that everyone has to do, but they can't do it.
Right.
So they can't be like successful because they can't do that.
Yeah.
So if I could change something, I would change just about like, I would say, I guess how your graduation path, I feel like I would kind of change that, because usually if you want to get into a certain field or something like that, they would say, okay, you'll take these set of classes, but out of those sets of classes, maybe like 30% of those classes you will never use again in your life.
Yeah.
And then that leads into grades, because you got to think with grading, like until college, all my life it's been you have to get good grades. You have to get the A. You have to get the A. But I feel like that's a huge reason why people cheat and why people would do anything for a grade.
Right.
Because you get a good grade and you get celebrated, you get praised, but then right when the class ends, you forget everything and you don't use it.
Right.
It's like, so then it's like, what's more important? What are we really in school for? Are we in school for just performance and numbers? Because that's what the bigger guys want. They want to see results. But it's like we give them results, but they don't give us something for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And so I will want the focus not to be on how well we perform in these tests and numbers, but how well we perform in actual situations that we can apply it to. Because, again, like I was saying, they'll say, okay, you want to go this way, you'll have to take these classes. And then you go through this path, and it's like along the way there's like weird stuff that you have to take. Like some people will be like, why do I have to take calculus? Like how would I use this? And counselor would be like, that's just what you have to do.
Right.
I've gotten that explanation so many times, like that's just the class you have to take in this path. And it's even like that a little bit in college, but the problem with it is that from when we are like young to once we like graduate high school, a lot of stuff is already like pre-planned for us, so like predetermined.
Right.
Like we may have some say so in a couple of things, but for the most part, people are telling us what to do. Then you get to college, and now it's like, okay, you're on your own. You can do what you want.
Right.
And we're like, well, I don't know. Like I've never really, a lot of people come to school and they're confused, and that's why people change their majors so much. Because people come into college having no clue what to do, because now that's when it's like you have the most flexibility to do something. And I feel like that part of high school is what I change, is just kind of mold it more for the student and give them more flexibility in classes they want to take.
Excellent. Well, if you had a 17-year-old in that non-traditional mindset right now as a junior or senior in high school, who may have had to have life skills rather than, the academia skills that is prepared for, what would you tell that person?
So I would basically tell them to learn from the people around them, because the people, for me personally, I felt like the people around me like made me understand a lot of stuff better. Like someone asked me a question recently about what's something that I wouldn't like in a classroom setting about like how things are being taught, and I said content. Like if a teacher gave me content and it didn't connect to what's going on today, it's just like information that you will have to just memorize.
Right.
Like it doesn't really do anything for me. If you can make it connect to real life or something I'm going through, then that's something I could use and relate to. And it's not even about remembering it. It's about actually knowing the material.
Right.
And so I would encourage that person maybe to just like learn from the people you're around, because then you'll understand other cultures and you'll understand things in different ways. Because if you look at it through only your lens, it's a lot of stuff you'll miss, because like people just don't teach it to you that way. They don't look at you and say, okay, he'll understand it in this way. Yeah. They just say, I'm gonna teach it this way. Whoever gets it, that they don't. If they want help, they can. Not understanding that like your background has a huge, like I read about this thing. It was called social identity. And it's just like a lot of things that make you who you are. It's like that has a lot to do with how you learn. Right. And so a lot of teachers, a lot of schools have a system and it disregards, they kind of just ignore the differences and just say like, they try to say, oh, we're treating everyone the same, make it seem like we're not discriminating anyone. But I feel like people being different is very important, and that needs to be paid attention to.
Yeah, that's how you learned.
Exactly.
I mean, that's amazing. Where can people find you on social media, man?
So on Instagram, it's just @_ Jahmari. That's pretty simple. Twitter, it's Jahmari _.
Right.
I mean,
awesome.
Facebook, Jahmari Moore. So.
Yep. We'll put all that up down here, man. I can't thank you enough for sharing your journey.
No problem.
I think our listeners and viewers are going to get so much out of it, man. I really appreciate you.
Thank you
Thanks
so much
for coming
for having me.
Good
No
luck in the
problem.
upcoming season. I look for some big hits.
Absolutely.
And seeing you on the ESPN, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Another Disruptor here, Jahmari Moore. We will see you guys next time on Disrupt Education.